president just signed a historical executive order that pretty much covers them all. Every single swamp monster, foreign and domestic. Merry Christmas. Executive order blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse or corruption. By the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, including the International Emergency Economics Powers Act, the National Emergencies Act, the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, Section 212 of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, and Section 301 of Title III, United States Code. I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, find that the prevalence and severity of human rights abuse and corruption that have their source in whole or substantial part outside the United States, such as those committed or directed by persons listed in the annex to this order, have reached such scope and gravity that they threaten the stability of international political and economic systems. Human rights abuse and corruption undermine the values that form an essential foundation of stable, secure, and functioning societies, have devastating impacts on individuals, weaken democratic institutions, degrade the rule of law, perpetuate violent conflicts, facilitate the activities of dangerous persons, and undermine economic markets. The United States seeks to impose tangible and significant consequences on those who commit serious human rights abuse or engage in corruption, as well as to protect the financial system of the United States from abuse by these same persons. I therefore determine that serious human rights abuse and corruption around the world constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States, and I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with that threat. I hereby determine and order all property and interests in property that are in the United States, that hereafter come within the United States, or that are or hereafter come within the possession or control of any United States person of the following persons, are blocked and may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt in. The persons listed in the annex to this order, any foreign person determined by the Secretary of the Treasury in consultation with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, to be responsible for or complicit in, or to have directly or indirectly engaged in serious human rights abuse, to be a current or former government official or a person acting for or on behalf of such an official who is responsible for or complicit in, or has directly or indirectly engaged in corruption, including the misappropriation of state assets, the expropriation of private assets for personal gain, corruption related to government contracts, or the extraction of natural resources or bribery, or the transfer or the facilitation of the transfer of the proceeds of corruption, to be or have been a leader or official of an entity, including any government entity that has engaged in or whose members have engaged in any of the activities described in subsections A and B, or of this section relating to the leader's or official's tenure, or an entity whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order as a result of activities related to the leader's or official's tenure, or to have attempted to engage in any of the activities described in subsections A and B, or B2 of this section, and any person determined by the Secretary of the Treasury in consultation with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, to have materially assisted, sponsored, or provided financial, material, or technological support for, or goods or services to, or in support of, any activity described in subsections A, B, and B2 of this section that is conducted by a foreign person. Any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order, or any entity, including any government entity, that has engaged in or whose members have engaged in any of the activities described in subsections A, B, or B2 of this section, where the activity is conducted by a foreign person, to be owned or controlled by, or to have acted or purported to act for or on behalf of, directly or indirectly, any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order, or to have attempted to engage in any of the activities described in subsections A or B of this section. The prohibitions in subsections A of this section apply, except to the extent provided by statutes or in regulations, orders, directives, or licenses that may be issued pursuant to this order, and notwithstanding any contract entered into or any license or permit granted before the effective date of this order. The unrestricted immigrant and non-immigrant entry into the United States of aliens determined to meet one or more of the criteria in Section 1 of this order would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, and the entry of such persons into the United States as immigrants or non-immigrants is hereby suspended. Such persons shall be treated as persons covered by Section 1 of Proclamation 8693 of July 24th, 2011. I hereby determine that the making of donations of the types of articles specified in Section 203 and 1702 to or for the benefit of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order would seriously impair my ability to deal with the national emergency declared in this order, and I hereby prohibit such donations as provided by Section 1 of this order. The prohibitions in Section 1 include the making of any contribution or provision of funds, goods, or services by, to, or for the benefit of any person whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order, and the receipt of any contribution or provisions of funds, goods, or services from any such person. Any transaction that evades or avoids, that has the purpose of evading or avoiding, causes a violation of or attempts to violate any of the prohibitions set forth in this order is prohibited. Any conspiracy formed to violate any of the prohibitions set forth in this order is prohibited. For the purpose of this order, the term persons means an individual or entity. The term entity means a partnership, association, trust, joint venture, corporation, group, subgroup, or other organization, and the term United States person means any U.S. citizen, permanent resident alien, entity organized under the laws of the United States, or any jurisdiction within the United States, including foreign branches, or any person in the United States. For those persons whose property and interests in property are blocked pursuant to this order, who might have a constitutional presence in the United States, I find that because the ability to transfer funds or other assets instantaneously, prior notice to such persons of measures to be taken pursuant to this order, would render those measures ineffectual, I therefore determine that for these measures to be effective in addressing the national emergency declared in this order, there need be no prior notice of a listing or determination made pursuant to this order. The Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State, is hereby authorized to take such actions, including adopting rules and regulations, and to employ all powers granted to me by the IEEPA and the Act as may be necessary to implement this order, and Section 2163 of the Act with respect to the determinations provided for therein. The Secretary of the Treasury may, consistent with applicable law, redelegate any of these functions to other officers and agencies of the United States. All agencies shall take all appropriate measures within their authority to implement this order. The Secretary of State is hereby authorized to take such actions, including adopting rules and regulations, and to employ all powers granted to me by IEEPA, the INA, and the Act as may be necessary to carry out Section 2 of this order, and, in consultation with the Secretary of the Treasury, the reporting requirement in Section 1264 of the Act with respect to the reports provided for in Section 1264 of the Act, the Secretary of State may, consistent with applicable law, redelegate any of these functions to other officers and agencies of the United States, consistent with applicable law. The Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General, is hereby authorized to determine that circumstances no longer warrant the blocking of the property and interests in property of a person listed in the annex to this order, and to take necessary action to give effect to that determination. The Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Secretary of State, is hereby authorized to submit recurring and final reports to the Congress on the national emergency declared in this order. This order is effective 12:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, December 21st, 2017.